Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. I am back from the land of enchantment and excited to talk to you. Appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on your radio, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, which is sponsored by Jokic Health, mental health and well-being for all. And yes, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program. I'd love to get your take on the day's topics. 719-247-1313 is the number that you could call or text in. You can also find me on social media at Gingerly X and at Kaufman Sports on Instagram. You will hear, I have one guest, Marco Micheletto, one of the newest members of Switchbacks FC. You will hear from him. Switchbacks getting ready for the season opener Saturday down in El Paso. Last week, you met Akeem Ward. Now you get to meet Marco Micheletto as we build up to the start of the season. So that's coming up. We'll do that bottom of this hour. That'll be the plan. But I want to start with the Denver Nuggets. I think the last two games for the Denver Nuggets, there are reasons for optimism. And I talked about this Tuesday when I was in Albuquerque. This is not a team. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of the games that matter, the signature wins, things like that, or starting to say this team is into moral victories because they're not. And the fact of the matter is they lost to Boston. And last night, beating the Kings is not a signature win. That's not a win that you say, oh, they're going to go to the NBA Finals now because they beat the Kings. Right? So it's not that. But what you can use in some of these games, if you watch them, are just to say, are there some things there that you go, that could be big. That could be important. And then you could see if the Nuggets do those things in the games that matter. And what I'm specifically talking about more than anything else, this new way of guarding Nikola Jokic that JJ Redick unleashed a couple of weeks ago, and now everybody's trying to do it, including the Sacramento Kings. And the fundamentals of this defense are, we will dare anybody else not named Nikola Jokic to beat us. And you can say that over the course of these last couple of weeks, Nikola Jokic hasn't been quite as effective. I know the bar is ridiculously high, but you look at the second half against Boston, certainly he was hampered by something. He was limping around on the court, but his touches and shots weren't there. Last night, the Kings tried to do the same thing, and the other teams that the Nuggets have played between the Lakers and the Kings have done some form of it. But the idea is this, because it used to be, if you recall, do you double team Jokic and he's going to pass out of it and find a teammate for a good look? Or do you go one-on-one and encourage him to score? Because if he becomes just a scorer or predominantly a scorer, and I've talked about this before, the best version of the Denver Nuggets is not when Nikola Jokic just scores 40. Not if it comes at the expense of, 12 to 15 assists, right? So that used to be the decision, and we'd see a bunch of different ideas. Some teams would say, we'll live with Nikola Jokic, the scorer. Others said, we want to force him to pass. And no one was really able to come up with anything that you could cling to and say, this is the way to stop Nikola Jokic. And I don't know if this new way is going to work ultimately. Again, I said after the Laker game, I'll continue to say it. I'll bet on Nikola Jokic figuring it out. Okay, but it's still new enough that we've seen teams have success, but they all decide one thing. They're all in lockstep agreement. We'll live with everybody else on the Denver Nuggets. So they will throw double teams, triple teams. They will front Nikola Jokic in the post. They will do everything they can to force other players to beat them. And that is a little bit of an indictment on the state of affairs with the Denver Nuggets around Nikola Jokic, isn't it? We would much rather, every team that plays the Denver Nuggets lately says we'll live with everybody else and take our chances. It didn't used to be that way. There used to be like legitimate trepidation about forcing Jokic to be a passer. And there isn't now. Or at least this is where teams have come in at. So what you have seen both in the Boston game and last night, maybe teams should be a little bit more worried about the players around Nikola Jokic. The Nuggets continue to play their game in the second half against Boston and were able to come all the way back from more than 20 points down against the reigning champions in their building when they were desperate to get a win, having lost back-to-back games. They played their game and other players stepped up. Jamal Murray came alive in the second half, and there were contributions throughout the roster to get the Denver Nuggets back in that game. Last night, there was a stretch, and I don't recommend this stretch for the Denver Nuggets, and I don't think it's necessarily a sign that all is well with the non-Jokic minutes. But they subbed out Nikola Jokic very late in the third quarter just to try and get an extra couple minutes, right? You sub him out at the end of a quarter, that's what he gets, a couple extra minutes to rest. The game was tied. I'm sorry. I gave away the ending. The score was 93-84 Sacramento. Didn't look like a lost cause. Looked like the way that the Kings were defending Nikola Jokic, much like the Lakers did, was going to work again. The Denver Nuggets, without Nikola Jokic on the floor, from the start of the fourth quarter till a little less than 7.5 minutes left, when Jokic came back in the game, they completely erased a 9-point deficit. Let me say that again. The Denver Nuggets, without Nikola Jokic on the floor, erased a 9-point deficit. And one of the players that was key in their comeback was Zeke Naji. What is going on with Zeke Naji? All of a sudden, this guy who was maybe the worst decision that the Nuggets organization has made in recent years, above letting Bruce Brown walk, although that was, they just flat out couldn't pay him what Indiana did. Letting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go, signing Dario Saric. Nothing stacked up to extending Zeke Naji's contract. And one of the big sticking points in the Nuggets' ability to improve themselves at the deadline was the fact that no one wanted Zeke Naji and his contract. And over the last few games, the number of players that have been better than Zeke Naji for the Denver Nuggets, you could count on one hand. And it makes you wonder, you can either look at that one at two ways. You look at it and say Michael Malone and the way he did it was absolutely right. All this stuff that has been happening with Zeke Naji, the lack of minutes, the reports out there that no one wanted to trade for him, all of this stuff made him work harder. So that when he did get his chance, he made the most of it. You could look at it that way. Or you could look at it and say, why in the world didn't they play Zeke Naji sooner? And I've said this before. The idea that the Nuggets can be half in and try to do it both ways, it just doesn't work. We're going to win, but we're also going to develop. It hasn't worked. You either got to ride with these young guys or you don't. So there's an argument to be made that if Zeke Naji was in the rotation sooner, then maybe we see this Zeke Naji sooner. And I would lean towards the latter because the former is a level of galaxy brain from Michael Malone that even though I like Michael Malone a lot, I can't fully invest in the idea that everything done up until this point was so deliberate in order to get this result that relatively late in the season, Zeke Naji has become a revelation. I think much like with Jalen Pickett and some of these other young players that we've seen flash at times, the only time they get on the floor is when Michael Malone has no other choice. He's got to play him. But then they show something, and then they go right back to the end of the bench, never to be seen for another 2 weeks until an injury forces Michael Malone to play him again. But regardless of what side you fall on, Zeke Naji being the catalyst for the Nuggets bench to erase a 9-point deficit, and I don't care what state the Sacramento Kings are in. This bench, the non-Jokic minutes, it is as simple as the Nuggets are the best team in the NBA when Nikola Jokic is on the floor, and they are the worst without him. That's just the fact of the matter. So I don't care if they're playing the Kings or the Celtics or the Washington Wizards. The bench without Nikola Jokic in the game erased a 9-point deficit. It could be fool's gold. It absolutely could be. But it's something worth looking at moving forward. But you even look beyond that at some of the contributions last night. Christian Brown, 15 points on 5 of 10 shooting. Michael Porter, 13 points. Westbrook, 25. Jamal Murray, 24. Jalen Pickett, 5. Zeke Naji, 10. Peyton Watson had a few rebounds and a couple of points. If the Denver Nuggets can make teams pay for exerting all of their energy and putting all of their attention to Nikola Jokic, that is a significant development. Because part of the reason why this season has been such a slog and has had far more low points than high points is because you have the brilliance of Nikola Jokic matched by the opposite of brilliance from everyone else on the roster. And it wasn't that long ago that we were having a discussion about how little Nikola Jokic can rely on the people around him, how wildly inconsistent they are. And now you see these teams employing quite an extreme defensive game plan. And the Nuggets have in spurts here made teams pay for that. And they have players that you weren't really talking about stepping up, all of a sudden step up. But that's the way on the offensive end, that's the way to counter this. Somebody else on the Denver Nuggets has got to make teams pay for throwing 4 bodies at Nikola Jokic. They got to make them pay. And you've seen that a little bit here over the last couple of weeks when teams have started to employ this. Maybe not enough, right? It wasn't enough on Sunday for them to beat the Boston Celtics. And it really didn't happen till the fourth quarter last night with Sacramento. So you're not seeing it enough yet, but you're starting to see it. And think about it. If Michael Jordan didn't have Judd Bushler or Steve Kerr to pass the ball to, what happens with the Bulls dynasty? Nikola Jokic can't do it by himself, as brilliant as he is. And what teams have decided recently is that Nikola Jokic is the only thing holding this team together, and we're not afraid of anybody else on the Denver Nuggets. And it is incumbent upon the Denver Nuggets to make them afraid, to make them think twice. They're still going to exert most of their effort to slow down Nikola Jokic. This is not going away. But if there are players that can step up, and if you could say, wow, the supporting cast really helped out Nikola Jokic despite having kind of an off night, that's something we haven't talked about much this year. We have not mentioned the supporting cast stepping up for Nikola Jokic, and they did against Boston, and I thought they did last night. Something worth watching out for moving forward. 719-247-1313. I'll have more on this new formula to try and beat Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. And it has to do, and it's my least favorite conversation, but I think watching last night's game, we're going to have to get into it. The whistle and how much of it Nikola Jokic deserves and how much is he getting. That's coming up in a little bit. Coming up next, we are less than 24 hours away from the NHL trade deadline. Tonight, the Avalanche with their last game before the trade deadline. We'll talk about that next on Extra Sports 1300. lot of layers to what's going on right now with the Denver Nuggets. Aaron called in during the break and we were chatting a little bit. Ultimately what has to happen is that the supporting cast has to step up. I don't know that it's going to completely deter other teams from this new way of defending Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. I don't think it's going to deter them because they're still going to say, if we can limit Nikola Jokic, then that goes a long way, especially teams like, think about it. Think about the teams above them in the standings, the Lakers, the Thunder. Look at the other side of the bracket if the Nuggets are fortunate enough to get out of the West, Boston and Cleveland. Like, they'll feel like, you know what, if we can limit Nikola Jokic, we got enough firepower to match what they have. So it's not going to completely deter other teams from playing this way. But the fact of the matter is they have to make them pay. That's their only chance. And they didn't when the Lakers unleashed it. The Nuggets got blown out in that game. And I think with Boston, it was similar, except that the Denver Nuggets tried to out-Celtic the Celtics, taking way too many threes and weren't playing their game. And when they played their game, other guys stepped up and they were able to get back in it. But this is just a new way of talking about the same issue that has been plaguing the Denver Nuggets this season. It's the supporting cast. That's where the question mark is. Right? It's not with Nikola Jokic. It's whether he has enough around him. And I'll tell you one player right now that over this stretch probably hasn't produced at the level he needs to. It's Michael Porter Jr. Because here's what the defense that Sacramento played and what the Lakers played. It's also packing the paint, which makes it very difficult to cut to the basket. So even though it's more about limiting Nikola Jokic, an added benefit is, hey, this is a team that doesn't shoot threes. So if we pack the paint, now we can contest Jamal Murray's mid-range jumpers better. We could cut down on Christian Brown and Michael Porter, back cutting to the basket, Aaron Gordon from that dunker spot. Like, that's why what JJ Redick did a couple of weeks ago became such an aha moment for everyone around the league. Because it's like, wow, not only does putting 3 or 4 bodies on Nikola Jokic make Nikola Jokic's job much more difficult, it also essentially forces the Denver Nuggets to shoot threes. And the one guy above everyone else that you need to be able to rely on to be able to do that is Michael Porter. And outside of the 6-for-7 outing he had against Detroit, he's shooting 22% from 3 since the Laker game. That's not nearly good enough. Now, a 6-for-7 night against Detroit is certainly going to up it a little bit. But outside of that one Detroit game, he's shooting 22% from 3. It's got to be guys not named Nikola Jokic. And they have to hit threes. Not turning into the Boston Celtics, but just a couple. Just to make them think. Right? Right now, teams seem to have such a one-track mind about how to beat the Denver Nuggets. You got to put a shred of doubt in their mind. And just by knocking down a couple of threes, and in the reputation that Michael Porter has around the league, you don't think if he knocks down like back-to-back threes that teams aren't going to go, we may want to get out on him because Michael Porter, in the Detroit game's a perfect example, right? He can't get it going in any of these other games. He knocks down a couple against Detroit, and he ends the night 6-for-7. Everyone talks about the Murray flurry. Like Michael Porter, when he gets hot, he can knock down a lot of threes. But it's ultimately on the supporting cast. You got to step up. Haven't done it a lot this year. Have done it a couple of times here of late. Something worth monitoring moving forward. Now, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I believe it's 1 o'clock. Time zones are hard for me. The NHL trade deadline is going to take place. And I believe that the Colorado Avalanche are trying to cook up something big. Now, will they get that something big done? I legitimately do not know. But adding Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey, who, by the way, Vesey will be in the lineup tonight when the Avs take on the Sharks in their last game before the trade deadline. So you get your first look at him. But that another move like that, I don't see the point. Especially if you look at, and I'm not overly concerned with the draft capital that the Avalanche gave up. I am over the idea of the Avs sustaining their window for 5 or 6 years. Same with the Denver Nuggets. I'm worried about now. Okay, and there's other examples across the league of teams. You know, Vegas is a great example, right? Vegas has been about as successful as the Avs have been lately, and they could not care less about their prospects or their draft picks. And they're in decent shape. So call me Les Snead, but I'm not overly worried about the amount of draft capital that the Colorado Avalanche give up. The thing with the Denver Nuggets is they don't have any. So you don't have to worry about effing them picks because they don't have any picks. But it really looks like it's a seller's market right now in the NHL. So if you have to give up, even though I'm not overly concerned with the Avs giving up a second round pick to make the deal they did, can you imagine what the asking price is for a player of more significance? So I don't know if the Avs are going to be able to pull something big off here. I got to imagine it's around the second line center. And Elliot Friedman was on TNT last night. And, you know, Biz has been leading the charge and beating the drum for Sidney Crosby to join the Colorado Avalanche. And Elliot Friedman basically asked him if he's seen the movie Dumb and Dumber. So that tells you where Elliot Friedman, one of the most respected insiders in the NHL, feels about the chances of Sidney Crosby being on the Colorado Avalanche. But until 1 o'clock passes, go ahead and dream your dreams. But whether it's Braden Shen or somebody else, I got to believe that's where the Avalanche are looking. And if they can't get that done, I don't know that the Avs will feel like they missed. I don't know how much the Avs are going to lament it. Because I think Chris McFarland can feel a slight level of vindication. Because Valeri Nichushkin's reintegration into the lineup has now led to Casey Middlestat producing in multiple games. that duo has worked. Now, you could say it's small sample size. You could point out the teams that the Avalanche are playing, and that is totally fair. But this is Chris McFarland's calculation. It wasn't just, hey, I'm going to trade Mikko Rantanen and get Marty Necas, and all is going to be good to go. He's saying, I also got Big Val that's going to come back. And with Necas and Val, and then I also get Jack Drury to help with our depth. All of that combined is going to make us miss Mikko Rantanen less. So I think the Avs are trying, because I think not that they believe at this point Casey Middlestad is going to become the player that they hoped. And I think that's why they're looking at second line center. But because of the early returns with Nichushkin's return to the lineup, I think Chris McFarland is not going to lose a lot of sleep if he can't swing a big deal for a second line center. Because I think he feels a bit vindicated looking at that second line and how they've been over the last few games since Valeri Nichushkin has returned. But I think they're in there. I can't imagine it's just going to be another kind of meh addition like the trade. There are a lot of names, a lot of moving parts to the Ranger trade, but it didn't net anything that's like, wow, that's a big time move. I put it the other day, it's kind of like a finishing move. It was like when the Avs added Cogliano a few years ago, or when they added Nico Sturm. It was just this, hey, we could use some more depth if we don't have to give up a ton to get it. We feel pretty good about the core of our team. We'll just give them some supplementary depth. That's what that kind of move was. In order for the Avalanche to maximize their chance this year, whatever that looks like, of winning a Stanley Cup, I still think they need an upgrade at 2C. And we'll see if they can swing a deal between now and 1 o'clock tomorrow. Here's the probably outside of the Avalanche, but kind of Avalanche adjacent part of the trade deadline that is going to be fascinating. Are the Hurricanes really going to trade Mikko Rantanen? I mean, are they really going to do this? Because if they trade Mikko Rantanen, they lose the trade by forfeit. Like, that's how it works. You know, a lot of people already pointing out how much more productive Necas has been than Mikko Rantanen. I still bet on Mikko. And I think there would need to be more time to really gauge who won that trade. And initially, I'm like, the Avs lost that trade because they gave up the best player in the deal. But if the Hurricanes flip Mikko Rantanen, that's a wrap. I don't know if you want to say, that's how I would put it. The Avs won the trade by forfeit. If the Carolina Hurricanes ship out Mikko Rantanen, then I think you have to concede that the Avs won the trade, if only by forfeit. They can't be seriously considering this, can they? I mean, what a massive swing and a miss. And you didn't think when you acquire Mikko Rantanen, and I said this about Mikko Rantanen when he was with the Avs. Like, I didn't think that Mikko Rantanen was going to sign a deal before free agency. The salary cap was set to go up. You had to know those numbers. And I think Mikko Rantanen was looking to cash in to some extent, or at least be able to say, hey, look how much of a discount I'm giving you, Colorado, because the cap's going to jump up this much, and I only want this much of a raise. So I felt like Mikko Rantanen wasn't going to sign a deal with the Avs during the season. And there's been a lot of reporting both ways of whether he was actually willing to sign on the dotted line or willing to give the Avs a discount or whatever. If the Hurricanes made this deal expecting Mikko Rantanen to sign on the dotted line within weeks of arriving in only the second NHL city he has ever known, right? All that loyalty and everything, that all goes out the window. Isn't that part of Carolina's calculation here? That we got to kind of win over Mikko Rantanen? And it seems like they just expected him to turn around and sign. It's like the guy has played in one city his entire career. He's blindsided by this trade. And you expect him to, I don't know that Luka would sign on the dotted line right now if the Lakers put an extension in front of him. It's like, I gotta let the shock is gonna kind of gotta wear off a little bit. I gotta get settled. I gotta see if I like this place and like my teammates, see what we do. See how far we advance in the postseason. Carolina didn't think that was going to be part of this, that they were going to kind of have to ride it out with Mikko Rantanen and risk losing him in the summer. I had to imagine with the way that agents talk and general managers talk, you would think that the Hurricanes had some indication that maybe they could get Mikko signed this summer. But if they turn around and trade him tomorrow, holy smokes. What a catastrophic swing and a miss this was from Carolina. I mean, they'd be conceding. Trading him now, this is going to sound counterintuitive because trading him now, you're going to get something for him, and he could walk in the summer for nothing. But given the circumstances, it's almost worse if they deal him now. That this has all gone so poorly that the Hurricanes are looking to cut their losses almost immediately. I don't believe that they'll trade Mikko Rantanen. I don't believe it. But there's a lot of smoke billowing. And we'll see how much fire's behind it. Have you seen one of the possible landing spots? Think about this. Right now, if you're an Avs fan, you probably still aren't completely over the Avalanche trading Mikko Rantanen, but at least you feel pretty good about what you've seen from Marty Necas and everything. What if Mikko Rantanen was traded to Dallas? Dallas and LA seem to be two of the landing spots I keep seeing and reading. Oh, could you imagine? I can, because I would do a show tomorrow and I probably lead, if not with a big Avs trade, I might lead with Mikko Rantanen joining the Dallas Stars. That would be, so maybe Carolina would lose the trade by forfeit, but they'd kind of stick it to the Avs in the end in a way by trading him to Dallas. Oh, that'd be tough to take. But it's one of the places. We'll see what happens. That's the biggest storyline, I think, going into tomorrow. And then from the Avs perspective, can they swing a deal for a 2C? Because if they get another depth defenseman, The story will either be Avs upgrade at the second center spot or they fail to upgrade the second center spot. Not going to sit here and talk about a third pairing D-man or a fourth line winger. All right, you already did that deal. If you're going to do something big. And I do think that the Avs are trying. And we'll see if they can get it done before 1 o'clock tomorrow. 719-247-1313. Coming up next here from one of the newest members of Switchbacks FC, Marco Micheletto, looking to hold down the middle of the field for the Switchbacks Saturday in El Paso. What a coincidence. I was just going to talk about the reigning USL champions. Switchbacks FC opened the season on the road in El Paso on Saturday. And one player that I am certainly expecting to see, and I think he'll be starting, although I talked to James Chambers today and I asked him straight out if I guessed, because I know he wouldn't volunteer the information. I said, if I can guess your starting 11 for Saturday, will you tell me? He said, absolutely not. Those coaches just won't give you anything. But I do think that Marco Micheletto will be in the midfield on Saturday for Switchbacks FC. Now, this is a guy that has recently gone up against the Switchbacks, one of these guys that the Switchbacks have brought from the dark side, not the darkest side, right? There are different shades here, right? The darkest side that you can bring somebody over from is San Antonio, right? Justin Dillon would be the current example of that. But New Mexico United still considered the dark side. And with Speedy Williams moving on to expansion Lexington, that's a significant role to compensate for. And it's not a 1-1 thing. They brought in depth, multiple players that can play in that role. But you connect dots and you're like, okay, you lose Speedy Williams to bring in Marco Micheletto. Kind of seems like the move was made with an eye on the fact that they were losing Speedy Williams. But one way or another, he will be a major contributor to Switchbacks FC this year. Earlier today, caught up with Marco at practice and asked him the anticipation level from he and the team to get this season started.
Sky high. I think it's sky high any start of the season, first game. You get the
Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Thursday. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you watching if you are doing so, or I appreciate whenever you do. On our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, also on my personal channels on those socials as well. Going to be a lot of hype surrounding the start of the NFL year, as if, I mean, everything. I keep going back to the schedule release. Like, everything in the NFL is hyped up, right? But there seems to be a little bit more juice to this start of the year, this start of free agency. And it's only been boosted by some of the significant names that are now going to be looking for gainful employment elsewhere. We had the Kansas City Chiefs move on from Joe Thuney, one of their more important players this year, his ability to move from one spot on the line to the next. They traded him to Chicago. You have Joey Bosa getting released by the Chargers. Now you have Tyler Lockett in Seattle released, and you have DK Metcalf now demanding a trade. And this, in addition to all the names like, T. Higgins being franchise tagged. I think you could still swing a deal for T. Higgins, but franchise tag usually means, that's where he's going to be. But then you have Chris Godwin was not franchise tagged. He's going to hit free agency. So there are a lot of names out there that are going to be interesting to NFL fans. And a lot of these names that are going to be out there are going to be interesting to the Denver Broncos and their fans. And I think even more so when you look at the fact that the Chiefs, and I've seen it on social media, Chiefs moving on with Joe Thuney. Oh, they're rebuilding. They're vulnerable. Get them. Chargers releasing Joey Bosa. Wow, they're releasing Joey Bosa. There's no way the Chargers are going to be as good next year. Now is the time. I think that's the sense that I'm getting, that Broncos fans feel like now is the time to strike. Even more so. I think that feeling was already there whenever you have a season like Denver had. To feel like, all right, now we got to go, right? Bo Nix is in his second year. Get him weapons. The Broncos are now a playoff team. Now the next logical step is to win the division. What do they need to be able to knock off Kansas City? And that kind of thinking is dangerous. It's dangerous. I undertook 2 research projects last night. I will share my second research project with you coming up in a little bit. But I have said before that I think that the Broncos need to be very careful. So my hypothesis was, and it was really spurred a lot by Joey Bosa getting released, because that is a huge name. And there are going to be a lot of fan bases that are like, oh, we got to get Joey Bosa. He'd be a game wrecker. And my premise is the guys who are available for a reason. In the NFL, you have maybe more tools in your toolbox as an NFL team to retain your talent, right? You have 5th-year options. You have 2 different types of tags. We see all the Browns just opened up $30-something million in cap space by restructuring Deshaun Watson's deal. There are so many things available to NFL teams to allow them to keep their talent that I don't know how much game-changing talent is actually going out there. In the NBA, we're starting to see this more. And Adam Silver certainly has looked at the NFL, and there are a few owners in the NBA that also have stakes in NFL teams. And with the Supermax and all these other things that Adam Silver and the NBA has put into place, it's set up to be more of an NFL model, more parity, more ability to keep your players, not as much roster movement, all that kind of stuff, right? Second apron is another thing on top of that. So they're moving in that direction. But you see in baseball, there's arbitration, sure, but at some point the arbitration runs out, and how many players we've seen Juan Soto hit the free agent market. We've seen Shohei Ohtani hit the free agent market. I mean, when's the last time two players of that significance, anywhere close to that level of significance, have been free agents in the NFL? And don't say Saquon Barkley. Don't say Saquon Barkley. Because as I was looking at this, and I don't mean to pick on NFL.com, they were just the place that I went to look at this stuff. Saquon Barkley was ranked in the 20s in terms of top available free agents. So while there was certainly a belief that Saquon would be successful wherever he went, it wasn't like everyone last year was going, oh my God, Saquon Barkley is a free agent. Everybody has to go get him. There just wasn't that sense. And I have the receipts to prove it. Not saying you personally, I'm just saying across the NFL, there wasn't the sense of this crazy bidding war for Saquon Barkley. There just wasn't. Derrick Henry, by the way, was in the 30s. But getting back to my point, NFL teams, more than any other major professional league, have the most tools available to them to keep the players they want to keep. And my hypothesis, my theory was, I don't know if NFL free agency actually changes much. I don't think teams get the ROI on their free agent investments. So I just looked the last 3 years. That went into a blind. That's good researcher, right? I have a theory. I'm not looking to prove myself right. I'm looking to see if I am right. 2022. This NFL.com's list of the top available free agents, the top free agents that actually moved. Because here's the other part. A lot of the top free agents each year end up staying, right, for franchise tag or other ways. Terron Armstead was the number one free agent in 2022 that changed teams to Miami. Number 2 was J.C. Jackson to the Chargers. Remember how decorated of a Charger career J.C. Jackson has had? Number 3 was Von Miller going to Buffalo. Now, he got hurt, right? So you could say that was a freak thing. You could also point out Von Miller's age. Was that part of the calculation from the Rams of letting him hit free agency? That the likelihood was higher that he was going to get hurt playing the position that he does. So it was Terron Armstead 1, J.C. Jackson 2, Von Miller, Carlton Davis went to Tampa, Chandler Jones went to the Raiders. I don't need to remind you how that ended. Tyrann Mathieu went to the Saints from Kansas City. Marcus Williams went to the Ravens. Allen Robinson to the Rams. Emmanuel Ogbah to Miami. And Brandon Scherf to Jacksonville. How many of those do you think really hit? 3? 2? How about 2023? Javon Hargrave to the San Francisco 49ers. Orlando Brown to the Bengals. DeAndre Hopkins to the Titans. Remember how hyped DeAndre Hopkins' arrival in Tennessee was? And 2 years later, he's going to the Chiefs for nothing. CJ Gardner-Johnson. Pretty good pickup for Detroit. He didn't last long. He's in Philly now. James Bradbury, the Eagles fans wanted him run out of town. Jesse Bates for Atlanta. That didn't change much in Atlanta, did it? And then how about Mike McGlinchey for the Denver Broncos? There's one. There's one impact. Draymond Jones to Seattle. Right? Broncos signed Zach Allen over Draymond Jones. Did you see the news over the weekend? Draymond Jones was released by the Seahawks. At number 9 is Zach Allen. That's worked out. And number 10 was Odell Beckham going to the Ravens. Just last year, here are the top 10 available free agents by NFL.com. Chris Jones stayed in Kansas City. Number 2 was Kirk Cousins. Number 3, Josh Allen, the pass rusher. He stayed, so he never hit the market. Christian Wilkins to the Raiders. How dynamic would Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins be? Well, not enough to win any football games. Brian Burns to the Giants. L'Jarius Sneed, leaving Kansas City. Justin Madubuike stayed in Baltimore. Antoine Winfield, Danielle Hunter, pretty good for the Texans. And number 10 was Mike Evans, who stayed in Tampa. So I throw those names out there. What would you say the hit rate was on free agents? Just the last 3 years. 2 or 3 of the top 10. And if you are ranked in the top 10, you are viewed as a significant free agent. Therefore, you get paid. I think the ROI is not there for a high-priced free agent. There has been evidence that they are. Mike McGlinchey has been good for the Denver Broncos. So is Zach Allen. Not saying every single high-dollar top free agent has been a bust. It's not what I'm saying. But more often than not, if you're looking to ultimately that en vogue phrase of a force multiplier, right? We're looking for a force multiplier, someone to take us from here, and you can't see me on the radio, but you could see me on the stream, here to here. And my left hand is lower than my right hand. If you're looking for somebody via free agency to greatly change your chances the next year, more often than not, it will not work. And you will be stuck with a high-dollar player that is either unavailable, is either eating up too much cap space on a team that's floundering, or you're moving on from them within a couple of years. So it just goes to me saying I don't think the answers to what the questions the Broncos have are external or in free agency, I should say. There are some, the draft, 100%. Because those are not high dollar assets, right? They're young, controllable. That's the type of player that you need on your roster. But not one of those is even going to change that much either. So now here's door number 3. And that is trades. DK Metcalf. You want DK Metcalf? First of all, it's going to cost you a first and a third, according to Diana Rossini. And when I saw that, I spit out my coffee. Give me a break. Seattle's going to get a 1 and a 3. What do they think they're going to trade with the Denver Broncos again? The Denver Broncos without Sean Payton? No way that they're going to get a first and a third. But forget what the return's going to be. Here are, and this is courtesy of Spot Track. Here are recent examples of 27-year-old wide receivers that have been traded. Browns get Odell Beckham from the Giants. Bills get Stephon Diggs from the Vikings. Cardinals acquire DeAndre Hopkins from the Texans. Texans acquire Brandon Cooks from the Rams. Browns acquire Amari Cooper from the Cowboys. Dolphins get Tyreek Hill. Jaguars get Calvin Ridley. Bears get DJ Moore. Seems like, just as I go through them, seems like there's a little bit higher of a hit rate. Why is that? Because teams are willing to part with quality players if they're getting something in return. So as we sit here less than a week before the NFL league year begins and all of this craziness can begin in full force, if you are somebody that is saying Broncos need to go get this free agent and this free agent and this free agent and this free agent, well, stop. That's too many. You're just not going to hit. The odds are just against you that you're going to hit on multiple free agents. Can you get one? Yeah, but even some of the top free agents don't end up hitting. Trade, little bit more. But again, what are we talking about here? What are we expecting for the Denver Broncos? Are we expecting the Denver Broncos to acquire a player one way or another, draft, trade, or free agency, that is going to take them from being the 7th seed in the AFC to winning the AFC West? I'm telling you, that person does not exist. They don't. There's not one free agent, not one player available for trade, not one player in the draft that is going to take the Broncos from where they are to the top of the AFC West. And the belief that there are players that can is what gets teams in trouble. The most important thing that the Broncos are about to do this offseason is the draft. And none of those guys, not even Tyler Warren or Ashton Genty, are going to jump the Broncos up another notch. Trades, I'll say this. I'd probably rather the Broncos trade for a Garrett Wilson than sign a Chris Godwin. But I'd rather they get Egbuka from Ohio State in the draft than the other two. What you're going to get this offseason can give you hope, but the idea that players available this offseason for one way or another are going to completely change the fortunes of a team. It's just the evidence is not there to back that up. And you could throw out Saquon Barkley all you want. I'm not saying there are exceptions to every rule. But even you look at a Derrick Henry, I mean, were the Ravens like in a completely different position than they were 1 year ago? Yeah, Derrick Henry was great for him. So it was a great signing by them. Not saying anything other than that. It was a great signing. Did it completely change who the Baltimore Ravens were? Because last time I checked, they still didn't get to a Super Bowl, which is their next step. So even the best acquisitions of last offseason did not ultimately, many of them didn't lead to. In fact, one of the more successful teams in the NFL was a team that was shedding players in the Buffalo Bills. They were one of the most successful teams in the NFL this year. And they were giving up guys. They were losing guys. I'm not saying there aren't players that exist out there that can help the Denver Broncos. And I'm not saying that the Broncos should just sit out free agency. But that initial first wave of the big names, the high dollar players that are going to go, that's where teams get trapped. That's where teams get in trouble. It's the ones that kind of wait it out, wait for asking prices to go down, wait for the Seattle Seahawks to give up on this idiotic idea that anyone's going to give them a first-round pick for DK Metcalf, and maybe you settle in at a third or a fourth. DK Metcalf, I think, I'd be more amenable to the idea if I'm the Broncos if I'm giving up a third or fourth rounder. The smart teams are not the ones that grab the headlines right away. And I think that the best thing that the Broncos can be is kind of that second wave of free agency team. And that probably means they're going to lose out on Chris Godwin. Probably means they're not going to get Joey Bosa if that's somebody that you're interested in. I don't even know if it means that they'll get Nick Bolton. But history will tell you that those kind of teams prove to be smarter than their peers. And we've already seen it. We've seen one team with a ton of money go out and I think make a wrong decision, and that was Washington acquiring Deebo Samuel. I think Washington is in the business of making headlines and going for it. I don't think Washington is as close to going to a Super Bowl as their NFC Championship berth last year would tell you that they are. You got to be able to evaluate who you are in the building and be realistic about it. The Broncos probably aren't going to win the AFC West next year, regardless of who they bring in. Some tragedy would have to befall the Kansas City Chiefs for them to cough up that division this year. Could they make a couple of tweaks and be better than the Chargers? Maybe. But that second wave of free agency, that's the draft. The difference between those two teams could be made up in those ways. But if it's, all right, 7 seed to now AFC champions or 7 seed to division champions, or it just, those players don't exist because teams, if they were that good, would hold on to them. They have so many ways to do it. I think slow and steady, smart, frugal is the way for the Broncos to go. And they can still be exactly in the same spot and maybe even improve a little bit. But I think a big swing would be a mistake. 719-24-7, 1313. Take your thoughts. Who would you like to see the Broncos go after? Whether it be free agency trades, any of these names coming across the wire, DK Metcalf, Joey Bosa, any of these guys pique your interest. I'll take your thoughts on that. Coming up next, if teams are going to continue to play Nikola Jokic the way that the Kings and most famously the Lakers have, the NBA officiating must catch up. One name that has become available in NFL free agency that I actually would put probably at the top of the list for the Denver Broncos. And I think he will not rank in the top 10 of any website's free agent list. Evan Ingram is now a free agent. And I said when Sean Payton talked to Kay Adams and said, what we need is a joker, I immediately pointed at Evan Ingram and said, this guy has those characteristics. Now, is he the player that he once was? No. Nope, he's not. But the Broncos could bring in Evan Ingram and say, and not hang a banner, because hanging a banner, it hasn't worked for other people over the years. But they could say mission accomplished. If they get Evan Ingram, that he's a joker. And here's the thing about this joker position that I think some people may misrepresent a little bit. All Sean Payton wants, first and foremost, before anything else, is just a guy that leads to matchup problems. So if you have to put a defensive back on Evan Ingram because you can't cover him with a linebacker, now Sean Payton can play off of that and mix and match in other ways and scheme it up. So just the existence of this type of person is kind of what Sean Payton wants first and foremost. I don't think, even if they get Tyler Warren in the draft, I don't think that you can expect, I wouldn't draft Tyler Warren for your fantasy team. Or at least I wouldn't expect Tyler Warren to be one of the best tight ends available in fantasy, or one of the best tight ends in fantasy football this upcoming season. I don't. Because I've seen the way Sean Payton operates with these young players since coming to Denver, and he's very Michael Malone-ish. If he can't trust you to do your job and to run your routes, which many rookies can't be trusted right out of the gate, it's just a fact of the matter. He's not going to put you out there. Marvin Mims? Anybody? Troy Franklin? Now, certainly Tyler Warren's talent would lead you to believe he has a better chance of getting on the field sooner and being a bigger part of this Broncos offense sooner. But Sean Payton wants competency and football IQ from these guys first and foremost. And if that's not there, he's not putting you out there. He doesn't care what kind of a freak you are as an athlete. He'll say the same thing he said about Marvin Mims. We got to find ways to get him on the field. But he's just being nice, because he's not going to say, I can't play this guy because he doesn't know what routes to run. Not going to call the guy out. But he says, we got to find. Tyler Warren would be that, or Colston Loveland would be that. I could see it now. Week 4, week 6. We got to find more ways to get him on the field. We got to find him more ways to get touches. That's on us. But it's not. Because if they were ready to be relied upon, then Sean Payton would find them and find ways to get them on the field and to get the ball to them. So just having somebody at the running back position, or it's almost like the Denver Nuggets with everyone not named Nikola Jokic. You're just looking for somebody to make the defense think about something else and do something that they wouldn't normally do. The Broncos tight ends last year, if we look at the tight end position, Broncos tight ends could be covered by defensive tackles. I mean, let's be real about how good the Broncos tight end core was last year. because none of them were physical mismatches. They were all blocking tight ends. What defense is going to respect Adam Troutman, with all due respect? Or I'll use the Sean Payton phrase. I say this respectfully. Who is worried about Adam Troutman? But Evan Ingram, because of what he has done in the past and what he brings to the table from a physical perspective, you might have to kind of think about defending him in a different way. And that's all Sean Payton wants. That's all he wants. He just wants to have something over the defense. For them to do something out of character or to put a different type of player guarding one of his guys that normally wouldn't, and so he can use that to his advantage. Evan Ingram presents that. So I will move Evan Ingram right now to the very top of the Broncos list. Because if the Joker is at the top of their list, Evan Ingram's that guy. I don't know what he has left. I don't know how productive he'll be. Certainly the bar is pretty low for production from the tight end position for the Denver Broncos after last year. But his skill set, his size, his all of that stuff, and it's still at a relatively young age. He's not young anymore. But he's not Travis Kelce's age, I don't think. Maybe he is. I don't know. Travis Kelce just seems much older. Evan Ingram works. And then if the Broncos get him, then we can debate whether they should still invest their first-round pick in Colston Loveland. Because I think if Tyler Warren's there, I'd say take him. I'd say take him. And then you have Evan Ingram that can get on the field right away, and you can bring Tyler Warren along. But that's a freak athlete that you just can't pass up if he's available. Colston Loveland is a poor man's Tyler Warren with other needs for the Denver Broncos. If you get Evan Ingram and you can satisfy that Joker-like player, then maybe you can look elsewhere. You don't have to settle for second best. But Evan Ingram, released by the Jacksonville Jaguars, he checks the boxes. I mean, he's not the player that Jimmy Graham was when Jimmy Graham went to New Orleans. But that's the number one thing on their list is a Joker, and you can get this guy that's a veteran player, can probably be on the field day one. And maybe it opens up the possibility of going elsewhere with your first-round pick. Jaguars purging their roster. Christian Kirk was traded to Houston because they need another wide receiver. And Evan Ingram, one of the many released players. So we'll see. I'll be tracking that because I said weeks ago that Evan Ingram would be a guy for the Denver Broncos. Just saw that come across, so I broke the format a little bit. Coming up next, let's get into this Nikola Jokic stuff and Michael Malone's non-comments that actually spoke very loudly after the Kings game. We'll get back into the Nuggets win and the most significant part of the Nuggets win last night coming up at the top of the hour. But I have tried not to engage in this conversation because I just think it's just in many ways, it's just the lowest form of sports talk, is talking about whistles and the whistle being fair or not fair. I hate getting into, the referee missed this call and that call, and I don't like it. But I also watched the game last night. And I also saw Nikola Jokic's arm bleeding the other day. And sometimes you just can't sit idly by. And this new way of guarding Nikola Jokic, I think Michael Malone has a description of this new way of defending Nikola Jokic. Take a listen.
Yeah, it took a little while, to get acclimated to, them starting Jonas on Russ and just assigning a player to just mug Nikola all over the court.
That's how he describes it. Now, what Sacramento did was they fronted the post. They tried to deny the pass into Nikola Jokic by any means necessary. And you heard Michael Malone mention that they put Jonas Valanciunas on Russell Westbrook. Because this idea that you're just going to put your center on Nikola Jokic, it's not going to work. It will not work. And you would have a better chance of doing something with the pass into him with your larger players than you would with your larger players guarding him. So Sacramento played smaller players on Nikola Jokic. And there was a really good question. I think it was Ryan Blackburn. I want to give full credit. I think he's the one that asked the question last night. And it was a very good question and got a very good response. But he asked about the idea that smaller players, do they get away with more contact on Nikola Jokic?
Next question.
You and us.
I appreciate the question. I really do.
I'm not trying to get you.
No, I know you're not. I just, because there's so many things that I want to say. And if you guys want to start a GoFundMe, I will say what I want to say.
At some point, Adam Silver's got to figure out a way to find coaches who say exactly what Michael Malone said. Like at some point, Michael Malone saying things like that, I don't want to get fined, needs to be a finable offense because you're intimating the same thing that just flat out saying what you want to say does. Like we all know what Michael Malone is getting at. We're all smart enough to sift through, decipher that code to know his answer. If a fine was not going to be levied, he would say, yeah, the smaller players. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense. You're a smaller player. Oh gosh. They have to try just their darndest to at least be able to stand their ground against Nikola Jokic. How can we keep calling these guys for fouls? Like they don't bother him. This guy's tiny compared to Nikola Jokic, right? Like you understand the thought process of an official saying, I'm not going to call this 6'3" guard for bumping Nikola Jokic, even though under the written rules of the NBA, that would be a foul. I'm not going to do it. I got to give them a little bit. They would get killed if they had to guard Nikola Jokic straight up. It's exactly what the calculation is on these teams. It's exactly what the Kings are banking on. Nikola Jokic already has a reputation of not getting nearly enough calls as it is, with other giant human beings guarding him. Certainly, they're going to call even fewer fouls if we just have some guard fronting him. It's exactly what the Kings are trying to do. And it's what the Lakers did 2 weeks ago. If teams are going to continue to do this, the way they are guarding Nikola Jokic, all of these bodies thrown at him, if they're going to front him with smaller guards, mug him down the court, if they're just going to do more of this, what we have seen recently, the officiating has to catch up. They have to get wise to what is going on here. And all of this led me to my second big research project last night, which was, does Nikola Jokic really not get the calls? I mean, that's the perception. Is there a way that I can figure out numbers-wise if he does? So the top 10 players in the league in touches, Nikola Jokic is second. There's only one player in the NBA that touches the ball more per game than Nikola Jokic this year. And he is now a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. Only Luka averages more touches per game than Nikola Jokic does. So then I took the top 10 names on that list. And if you want to know them, it's in order. Luka number 1, Nikola number 2, Trae Young, James Harden, LeBron James, Giannis, Shea, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, and Damian Lillard. Those are the top 10 players in the NBA in touches. Now, I figured out what percentage of those touches they are fouled. Like, actually a foul is called. Do you know where Nikola Jokic ranks among those 10 names? 10th. Despite being second in the NBA in touches, among the top 10 players in touches, Nikola Jokic is fouled the least. And even because I thought about this, it's not entirely fair to do it this way, but I did it anyway just to see. Nikola Jokic is, of that list, one of the more selfless players. Right? He likes to pass the ball, probably more than anybody else on this list. Right? So if the goal here is to get the ball out of Nikola Jokic's hands, teams kind of feel like if Nikola Jokic is passing, that's a small win. And why would a team foul him when he's trying to pass it? It happens, but I would say the number of times that he is fouled on passes he's trying to make would be quite small. So the leap I made here was, all right, let me take out the number of passes. So I subtracted the number of passes per game from the number of touches and then figured out the foul rate, if you will. Even while doing that, Nikola Jokic is 6th of those 10 players. If you take out every pass he makes per game and say those don't count as touches anymore because you got rid of it and teams aren't going to try and foul you when you're passing, there are 5 players on this list that are fouled at a higher rate than Nikola Jokic. All that to me says, even with the leap I made, you still get to the point where no, he doesn't. He doesn't get the calls that he deserves. And that matches up with what you're looking at. Look at last night. You could say, well, Michael Malone's protecting his guy and saying they're mugging him. Did you watch the game last night? That's not hyperbolic. Did you watch the Laker game? It's not hyperbolic. It's what they're doing. If Laker fans want to talk about the galaxy brain that JJ Redick operates with, that's fine. Let's do that. You don't think part of it is that he knows that Nikola Jokic does not get the foul calls that other NBA stars do? You don't think that was part of JJ Redick's calculation? It absolutely was. So if teams are going to continue to do this, the officiating has to catch up. Because I'm telling you, if it doesn't, you're going to feel more and more like Nikola Jokic just isn't getting calls. It's going to be even worse if that is possible. Think about how much you've watched Nikola Jokic and how much you felt like he doesn't get the whistle he deserves. It's going to be worse moving forward if JJ Redick somehow has unlocked the new hip way to guard Nikola Jokic. And that should send a chill down your spine if you're a Nuggets fan. The idea that Nikola Jokic will get fewer calls or that he will get knocked around even more. Yeah. That's what this defense is. Something has to give here. And you think about in the playoffs, they let even more go. So they're going to let more go during the playoffs, and teams are going to, I'll tell you one team that's absolutely playing Nikola Jokic this way the entirety of the series. It's JJ Redick's team. And what also are they banking on? Had the conversation with Aaron earlier who called in. If Nikola Jokic has to deal with 3 and 4 players around him at all times, if he has to deal with more contact from opposing players over the rest of this season and into the postseason, what's going to happen to Nikola Jokic in Game 7 of the Western Conference Final? We all saw what Nikola Jokic looked like at the end of the Wolves series. That wasn't even the conference final. You don't think that's going to wear down Nikola Jokic? I'm not asking for him to be bailed out. Okay, there are other players. Luka, in case you think I'm taking some anti-Lakers stance and pro-Nugget stance, Luka has even more of a case than Nikola Jokic does. He touches the ball more than Nikola, passes it less than Nikola. And his foul rate, if you take out the times his passes, his rate is lower than Nikola's by a whopping 0.4%, but still. And I got to tell you, I'm just telling you the number. Shea's rate is lower. The new hip free throw merchant. You take out the touches that lead to passes, and Shea gets fewer foul calls than Jokic, which I found very interesting. But Luka absolutely has a case. The players that don't have a case are Trae Young, Giannis, James Harden, Joel Embiid, if we ever see him again in the NBA game, and Damian Lillard. If you just want to look at who the last people to complain about calls they don't get, that's the list. But Jokic should get more calls, and he should be getting more calls if teams are going to continue to play this kind of defense against him. Something tells me they're not going to. 719-24-7. 1313. Coming up next, we'll reset with the three stories that are driving the show, including the Nuggets win over the Kings and the positive of that, not Nikola Jokic getting mugged, but the other stuff that happened. Broncos free agency, Avalanche trade deadline, and guess who won't be playing tonight for the Carolina Hurricanes? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time Sports on a Thursday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Looks like some misreporting was going on. I didn't get sent-held, but there was some talk that Mikko Rantanen was not going to play tonight for the Carolina Hurricanes in advance of tomorrow's deadline, but then he did end up emerging and taking the ice for warmups. I found it interesting. Marty Necas weighed in. Actually, Marty Necas, voice of the people, he was asked earlier today about all the speculation that the Carolina Hurricanes may end up moving on from Mikko Rantanen after just acquiring him. And Marty Necas is like, they probably should have known if he'd sign a extension before he got there. That's what we're all saying. Wouldn't you have some kind of indication? It just feels like Carolina was just taken aback. Like totally, what? You just arrived and you don't want to immediately sign an extension with us? This is Raleigh, North Carolina we're talking about here. The minute you arrive at the airport, you are smitten by our city. I didn't think Mikko Rantanen was going to sign a deal immediately. I thought the idea from the Hurricanes was, look, they make a Stanley Cup run, maybe even they win it. And Mikko Rantanen's like, yeah, I'll stay in Carolina. I want to keep winning Stanley Cups. It's almost like they're shocked that Mikko Rantanen doesn't want to sign an extension there yet. Well, can't wait for 1:00 tomorrow. I think he stays, but just the speculation alone is quite juicy. Let's hit the 3 stories that are driving the show, shall we? All right, let's start with hoops for story number 1.
Murray has it inside the arc, guarded by Ellis. Head fake on the jumper. Kick out 3, Najee. Yeah! Denver leads 96-95 with Jokic on the bench.
What a highlight. Those words in that order, in that sentence, I never thought that would happen. Zeke Najee hits the biggest shot of the game when Nikola Jokic isn't on the court. In fact, I'll expand on what my friend Kaz said on the Altitude Radio Network, which you heard right here on Extra Sports 1300. The Nuggets erased a 9-point deficit with Nikola Jokic sitting on the bench. What I had to question, I had to look and see, like, if I had if my top was still, I had to spin the top like Leonardo DiCaprio on Inception to make sure that I was in the real world. Zeke Najee caps off a +10 spell in the non-Jokic minutes. Zeke Najee. I don't know which one of those things is as crazy, because I think it would be crazy if anybody on the Nuggets with Nikola Jokic off the floor hit a 3 to cap off a rally from 9 points down with Nikola Jokic on the bench. But the fact that it was Zeke Najee makes it doubly crazy. But therein lies the path forward for this Nuggets team. This new way of guarding Nikola Jokic, where you basically put 6 guys on him and dare anyone else wearing a Nuggets jersey to beat you. The only way this is going to work, and the Nuggets are still going to be able to do what they do offensively, is what happened last night in the fourth quarter. What happened in the second half against Boston? It's going to be other guys. Right? I made the analogy earlier, like What if Michael Jordan couldn't have passed the ball to Steve Kerr or Jed Bushler? Would he be 6 for 6 in NBA Finals? You need help. And the whole premise of this season is Nikola Jokic doesn't have enough help. And now you have this style of defense being played, which is going right at that idea. We'll live with anybody else beating us. In fact, the way we're guarding Jokic will make it so Christian Brown can't cut to the basket for those highlight reel dunks of his. Michael Porter can't cut to the basket. We can defend Jamal Murray's mid-range game better. It's Jokic-centric, but there are all these little added bonuses that I think as teams study the film from the Laker game, go, wait, if we do this, not only do we give ourselves a chance to limit Nikola Jokic, but now all these other things that the Nuggets do well, we kind of hamper them in that respect. But the path forward, it's the other guys. Great movie, by the way. But that's who it is. It's got to be Jamal Murray. It's got to be Michael Porter. It's got to be Christian Brown. And heck, if it could be Zeke Naji, great. Russell Westbrook was very good in the second half last night. I think Nikola Jokic is going to start to figure this out because he's the highest outside of maybe the guy in Los Angeles, you know, the other guy, not Luka, not the face of the franchise, that other guy that's in LA. I mean, Nikola Jokic's basketball IQ is off the charts. He'll figure it out. But in the meantime, like, this is really what do they call that, immersion therapy? Like, I've never done it before, but if you're afraid of drowning, do they like dunk your head in water? Like that kind of idea. The worst fear of the Nuggets players outside of Nikola Jokic is that they are going to have to be relied upon to win basketball games. And we saw in the Boston game, we saw it in the Kings game, and we saw other guys step up. Maybe this, maybe call me a cockeyed optimist, but maybe this actually does finally bring out the best of the Denver Nuggets. That they don't have that crutch of just get the ball to 15 or just wait till 15 comes back in. I mean, I'm talking like Nikola Jokic had 5 points, a rebound, and 2 assists. Like the guy was still, 22 and 14? So the Kings can't quite do it as well as some other teams can. But this guy's averaging a 30-point triple-double. If you get him to score a 20-point triple-double, that's a big fat win. But the Nuggets got in the second half against Boston, it was too little, too late, but you saw it. And you saw it last night in the fourth quarter. Now, can they do it for an entire game? And don't forget, 2 matchups with Oklahoma City are coming up. And you think that Oklahoma City is going to play this way against Jokic? You better believe it. But a good win for the Nuggets. Good win. Given the circumstances. And watch out for Zeke Naji. All of a sudden, a thing with the Denver Nuggets. Story number 2 is that I can't even do the math. By this time tomorrow, though, the Avalanche roster for their postseason run will be effectively set as the NHL trade deadline will pass. The Avalanche have their last game before the trade deadline tonight in San Jose, or against San Jose, excuse me. I think that the Avs are trying to upgrade the 2C spot. I think they're trying to find an upgrade for Casey Middlestat. And they can join the club because there are a lot of teams. Tampa pulled off a huge trade yesterday to get them stronger up the middle because that's where it starts, right? You got to be strong up the middle. one of the weakest parts of this Avalanche team for most of the season has been the second line center position. I do believe that Chris McFarland is trying to get a deal done, and I think he's trying to get a deal done of significance. Just offloading Casey Middlestat to bring in somebody that is going to be a free agent after this year, that doesn't strike me as what Chris McFarland wants to do. I don't know if we'll hear that the Avs are close. I don't know if they'll get it done, but I think they're trying. And if they don't get it done, I think there's been enough over the last few games where Chris McFarland goes, I don't hate the position we're in if I don't get a deal done. Because you just keep seeing the Pittsburgh game was another one where you just see Valeri Nichushkin next to Casey Middlestat seems to bring something out of Casey Middlestat that we have rarely seen this year. Had a goal the other night. I think Chris McFarland in some way feels like he'd like to upgrade over Casey Middlestat, but if we don't, it's not the end of the world. I think that's Chris McFarland's perspective. You may not agree with it. Now, we'll see what happens tonight. The last impression, if you will, of the Colorado Avalanche with Valeri Nichushkin back in the lineup prior to the trade deadline, you will see on the ice tonight against a team that should not put up much fight. So do we see more production from that second line that maybe even makes Chris McFarland feel more like, yeah, that extra draft pick you wanted? Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. We'll roll with Casey Middlestat if we have to. Avs and Sharks tonight. Also, side note, Macklin Celebrini and Nathan McKinnon, two former first-round picks. Kind of interesting matchup. I was in San Jose, just as an aside. Went to a Sharks game. Oh, as you might imagine, but boy, do they think Macklin is the great hope of that once proud franchise. They love him so much in San Jose. Which you would expect, right? But it was an amount of love being poured out from the Shark fans towards Celebrini that I'm like, I took note of it. The pop he got from the crowd, the number of jerseys, the things I was hearing, they love that dude. And he'll be on the ice tonight against a former first-round pick himself in Nathan McKinnon, who, oh, by the way, we can't, like Michael Malone, where he says we can't stop talking about how good Nikola Jokic is. Nathan McKinnon is leading the league in scoring. He's leading the Art Ross race. I don't think the season Nathan McKinnon is having is being talked about enough because it's when's Val coming back? When's Gabriel Landeskog coming back? Nathan McKinnon's leading the league in scoring. He's having a better season this year than he had last year when he won the MVP. And against the Sharks, no pun intended, he should be able to feast as he tends to do against that hockey club. But last impression before the trade deadline tomorrow afternoon at 1. Then for story number 3, over the weekend, you saw some significant NFL players that were either on the move or getting ready to be on the move. Joe Thuney gets traded to Chicago. The Chargers released Joey Bosa. DK Metcalf asked for a trade only after Tyler Lockett got released. There are some significant names that are joining the fray in when the start of the new league year hits next week. But I am here to tell you that if you're going to be one of these big spenders and you think that one of these free agents, you're going to throw a ton of money at them and you're going to get the return on investment that you were hoping for, I would say that history has not been kind to people who think like that. And this entire time leading up to the offseason, I've said the Broncos should be frugal. The Broncos should be careful. Don't be the top. Don't get into this bidding war for T. Higgins. Don't get in this bidding war for Chris Godwin. Don't spend a ton of money on an inside freaking linebacker. And there was a chance for the Denver Broncos to kind of go outside of that and to say, what do you know, Ryan? We're getting Deebo Samuel. And they didn't even make an offer, which tells me that this front office is mature, that they understand. And I'm going to give credit to Sean over George, because George did one of these kind of moves in recent years, if you recall. Looking for saviors, looking for supermen, and giving up a lot to get them and not getting the return on the investment. This is Sean Payton's influence. Shiny toy and Deebo Samuel. Broncos didn't even bite. Didn't even look his way. Smart. Now, it's not to say that the Broncos shouldn't be involved in free agency. And one player that I think that the Broncos should immediately target got released today by the Jaguars, and that is Evan Ingram. Coming off of a down year. And I know, I see the text messages. Evan Ingram is washed. Look at his numbers 2 years ago. But that's not even the argument I'm making for Evan Ingram. I don't think he's the player he once was. But in this search for, what did George Payton say?
I know we're searching for the Joker. It's kind of like the Loch Ness Monster, trying to find a goddamn Joker.
Evan Ingram checks the boxes. Is he the best Joker that Sean Payton will ever have? No, but the first part of the premise of getting a Joker is just to be able to create matchup problems. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to get the ball to this guy. You just have to make the defense adjust to him being on the field. Now, you got to throw a few passes his way, or else teams will stop worrying about him. But I'm not holding up Evan Ingram because my entire premise here is that there's no one, there's no trade, that no draft pick, and no free agent that is going to take the Denver Broncos from the 7th seed in the AFC to winning the Super Bowl or winning the AFC or even winning the AFC West. Your loftiest expectation should be that the Broncos are better than the Chargers. Nobody, including Evan Ingram, is going to change the Broncos' fortunes for this season so drastically. But that's always the hope people have when you go into free agency, that missing piece is there. They had one of the better, more productive off seasons just a couple years ago with Zach Allen and Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. And they still were not even close to making the playoffs. You felt better about where the Broncos were going, but the results really weren't there. And that's one of the more productive off seasons I can recall the Broncos having. Certainly in the post-Peyton Manning era. No saviors, no supermen are coming to the Denver Broncos. But Evan Ingram has the physical tools and isn't that far removed from being a productive player. He could be that Joker. And then you don't even have to worry about sweating if Tyler Warren's going to fall to the Denver Broncos. Because if he doesn't, you got Evan Ingram. And then you worry about the production of an Evan Ingram after that. I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money, because what you're telling me on the text line is probably what a lot of NFL teams are thinking. This is the type of move that I would endorse for the Denver Broncos at the right price, of course. And that's really the point here. You need to be a little thrifty. You need to set your budget and stick to it. Don't go out and buy all these things. I feel like that's what Washington's going to do. I feel like Washington is going to go on this crazy spending spree. And I already don't like their first move in Deebo Samuel. Broncos got to be more under control than that. But Evan Ingram fits into what the Broncos want more than anything else. And they might be able to get him at a decent price. 719-247-1313. We'll continue on with Drive Time Sports after this. 719-24/7. 1313 is the number. You like to check in with your thoughts. Tom on the officiating of Nikola Jokic says, if you're not going to do your job as a ref and call the fouls you deserve to get ripped by coaches, don't cry about little guys having to guard Jokic. Sign a center that can play defense. Well, they actually want the guards to guard Jokic. I mean, it would make the most sense for them, for a team to bring in, and Sacramento has one. I mean, they're the perfect example of this. That's why last night I kind of went, whoa. Jonas Valanciunas, 7-foot center. In fact, somebody that I thought would fit in very nicely with the Nuggets as a backup to Nikola Jokic, not guarding Nikola Jokic. They want the guards on him. But the premise here is whether a smaller player should be allowed to get away with more contact than a larger player. Because that's why I say Nikola Jokic, of the top 10 players in the league in touches, is 10th on that list of foul rate. That's when he was being guarded by bigger people. If last night is an indication about where things are going and how Nikola Jokic is officiated, or these last few games since the Lakers discovered that split the atom. I mean, that's how it was treated. Refereeing's got to catch up. I'm not saying Nikola Jokic deserves to have he doesn't deserve to get the most fouls called. I don't believe that. But whether you look in the numbers or watch the games, I don't know how you can't come away saying, man, this dude has one of the worst whistles in the NBA. And like I said earlier, I'm being fair. I went and did this research. Luka, Laker fans, start now. And you've probably already seen it. Luka doesn't get a good whistle. And you wonder why Nikola Jokic and Luka complain every single time down the floor. By the way, speaking of the Lakers, I get accused of loving on players a lot. Brett just accused me of it. Now throwing Evan Ingram into the mix. Come on. I don't think we're quite there yet, wouldn't you say? But that's fine. The hate that Kendrick Perkins has for Nikola Jokic knows no bounds. It really doesn't. Every time this guy talks, he slights Nikola Jokic. And you've seen the new hot topic in NBA sports talk after all the national talking heads were scolded by LeBron James. I mean, it's amazing that LeBron James the other night can say that why would anyone want to be the face of the league where everybody dumps on everything you do? And then immediately all I see is Colin Cowherd saying that LeBron James is the second best player in the NBA. I see Kendrick Perkins saying that LeBron is better than Nikola. I mean, where did all this come from? How do we go from dumping on everything? Because let's be real here. LeBron James is the face of the NBA. He is. If anybody is, he is. And for the national commentary to flip as quickly and go so far out of their way to praise LeBron James, it's like, come on now. We see what you're doing. It doesn't have to be this way. There is no reality in which LeBron James right now is a better player than Nikola Jokic. I don't think LeBron James is even the second best player in the league. Everyone's ignoring the fact that he gets one of the top 5 or let's say 10, just to be safe, one of the top 10 players in the league to join him. And all of a sudden are we sure LeBron isn't the second best player in the league or the top player in the league? He has Luka next to him. Shouldn't that hurt his case? Shouldn't be saying that LeBron isn't as good as you think he is because he has Luka now that teams have to worry about? It doesn't have to be these two extremes. And I'll tell you where LeBron James deserves to be praised. And I am sensitive to this because I have a significant birthday coming up that I have no intention of celebrating. And it's the same birthday that LeBron James just celebrated. He celebrated his. He was singing Kendrick Lamar in the club. You will not see me, or was it Drake? I don't remember. But you will not see me doing any of that. This is, in fact, the only mention of my birthday that you will hear from me until I make a random statement that I happen to be whatever my age will be when I celebrate this birthday, and I'm not celebrating it. When my birthday passes, when I am legally called this age. So I'm a little sensitive to it. What we are seeing from LeBron James and Alexander Ovechkin is unbelievable. And I can say that without calling LeBron James the best player in the NBA, because he's not. He's not the best player in the NBA. And I can say that what Alexander Ovechkin is doing right now at his age is amazing without doing what Darren Pang did the other night and call him a one-trick pony. Oh, all he does is score goals. Yeah, he's going to score more goals than any player in the history. We don't have to and this is what has happened because LeBron James is having this level of success at age 40. Now we got to open back up the Michael Jordan debate because Alexander Ovechkin, nobody is saying that Alexander Ovechkin will go down as a better player than Wayne Gretzky. But do you have to tear down Alexander Ovechkin? Can you not recognize how great he is at his age and what he is doing? He's having one of his best seasons of his career, approaching the age of 40. And LeBron James is having a great season at age 40. We don't have to automatically go to that bigger discussion because of what these guys are doing at an advanced age. I can still tell you that Michael Jordan is absolutely the greatest basketball player of all time. And I could tell you that Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. And nothing, and I mean nothing, that either Alexander Ovechkin or LeBron James does between now and the end of their career will change my mind. And call me closed-minded if you want. But there's nothing they can do. We don't have to crown them the greatest of all time because of what they're doing. Greatest scorer of all time? Yeah, I think LeBron James is that. He has the most points, doesn't he? Alexander Ovechkin. The discourse has been so ridiculous. And it actually takes away from the level of appreciation to say, you can't just appreciate what they're doing. You now have to have the conversation of whether they're the greatest in their respective sport. Neither of them are. Sorry, they're not. They won't be. If that's the bar, then you see what's wrong with the discourse here? Can Alexander Ovechkin, what he's doing, be amazing without saying, well, he's no Wayne Gretzky? Yeah, no duh. There was one of those guys. And it's same with LeBron, and it just tells you the differences in the way these sports are covered. Nobody's dumping on LeBron. They're trying to make him the GOAT again. Well, he's doing this at 40. He must be better than Jordan. No, I'm sorry. He's not. He played for longer than Jordan. That is a fact. Anything beyond that, we don't have to concede. But what LeBron James and Alexander Ovechkin are doing is they're defying science. They're defying sports science. And that was the case with LeBron before Luka got there. I'm just saying, let's not gloss over the fact that now he has one of the 5 best players in the league on his hip, and teams have got to now make a decision. Whereas before, I would say LeBron's season was more impressive before Luka got there. But it's amazing, isn't it? How it changes that quickly. LeBron says what he says, and now we reopen the LeBron Jordan debate. And it's even more amazing that we can't appreciate the fact that Alexander Ovechkin is going to break a record that we thought would never be broken. Right? LeBron James did that once. Wasn't that amazing? Broke Kareem's record. 10 years ago, you never thought you'd ever see that. 3 years ago, Alexander Ovechkin had no shot of catching Gretzky. No way. And not only is he going to pass him before the end of this season, he's going to do it in a season where he missed a significant amount of time because he broke his leg. He broke his leg, missed significant time, and he's still going to pass Wayne Gretzky. To me, it sullies what is going on when we have to always have the biggest discussion. Alexander Ovechkin, I'm not going to call him a one-trick pony. I mean, that's just like disrespectful. But we also don't have to put Alexander Ovechkin in the same sentence as Wayne Gretzky, because it just, they don't deserve to be in the same. Wayne Gretzky is a much better hockey player than Alexander Ovechkin. And on the basketball side of it, LeBron James cannot pass Michael Jordan for GOAT status. Can't. I know the next generation is going to say he's the GOAT. They will be wrong. And I will be one of those old men that say, you young kids don't know what you're talking about. A lot of this is generational. But you can't, I don't care how you feel about those two players. You can't not marvel at what they're doing at their age. What is Ovi now? 10 away? Nuts. 719-24-7, 13-13, back after this. Sharks and Avs coming up tonight. Late puck drop, 7:30. I saw some comments from Alexander Georgiev. He's at it again. And I was just talking with DJ Michaels was in studio. Apparently Raider Nation is freaking out and saying that the Raiders must get Aaron Rodgers because Max Crosby said that it would be legendary for the Raiders to land if Aaron Rodgers was quarterbacking the Raiders. And we have to always keep in mind that sometimes athletes are asked direct questions and we can't it's not like Max Crosby went unsolicited onto social media and said it would be legendary for us to get Aaron Rodgers. We need to. He didn't demand anything. What was he supposed to say? So I think there's some of that here with Alexander Georgiev because he's getting ready, and I think it will be him in net tonight for the Avs. They got that Russian goaltender who they feel pretty good about in San Jose, but I think it'll be Georgiev. I'll have to double check on that. I don't know that it'll change your mind too much about the game. I'll look. Let's see who the Sharks are starting tonight. But anyway, Alexander Georgiev was probably asked about his time in Colorado. So what is he supposed to say? Right? I don't want to talk about that anymore. Well, then now Alexander Georgiev is being difficult. And so he answered the question. But when you answer the question, you still have to understand how it's going to be perceived. And the big quote that Georgiev made was, all of a sudden, I felt the trust in the goaltending kind of evaporated there. All of a sudden, the Avalanche lost faith in Georgiev. I don't know what was going on the inside. But I can tell you, and I know you lost faith in Georgiev, not all of a sudden. I did not lose faith in Alexander Georgiev all of a sudden. I lost faith in Alexander Georgiev over an 82-game season last year. And then he redeemed himself with his playoff performance. And I said going into this year, we got to see. We got to see what Georgiev does. Will the real Alexander Georgiev please stand up? And I don't know who that guy was that stood up at the beginning of the season, but that was even worse than the version of Alexander Georgiev that I lost faith in. All of a sudden, come on, dude, have some self-awareness. The writing had been on the wall for a little while. But the one thing, though, that I was thinking about, Chris McFarland blindsided Mikko Rantanen with the trade. Could the powers that be in the Avalanche organization, Chris McFarland specifically, be a little, I don't want to say duplicitous, but just could everything be fine until it's not? Right? Because that's what happened with the Mikko Rantanen deal. Mikko Rantanen was blindsided by it because they were talking. He says they were talking. They were having productive conversations. And then all of a sudden, Chris McFarland's like dunzo, and he's in Carolina. So even though Alexander Georgiev's quote of all of a sudden seems to lack self-awareness. And even still, in my scenario in which Chris McFarland did not give Alexander Georgiev any idea that they were souring on him, he should still know that, hey, what I'm doing right now and getting lit up like a pinball machine, I'm probably not as safe in my job security as I once was. Like, there still is a lack of self-awareness that is behind those comments, I think. But is it possible that the Avalanche never gave him an indication of step up your game or else? Because that's how I could see where Alexander Georgiev would say all of a sudden, because I saw it with Mikko Rantanen. I'm going to be an Av. I'm going to be an Av. I'm going to be an Av. Now I'm in Carolina. What happened? So perhaps it's an organization holding their cards close to the vest. We certainly didn't see either the Georgiev trade or the Rantanen trade coming. Maybe you hoped it would happen with Georgiev. You didn't. Maybe you called for it to happen. Didn't see it coming. There wasn't a lot of rumblings. So perhaps that's the all of a sudden. But you still have to know, if you're Alexander Georgiev, that the level you are playing at, it's not like you're Patrick Waugh and you've given so much to the organization and they've won Stanley Cups with you to where you think you are indispensable and you are able to work this stuff out. You don't have that long of a leash, especially after an 82-game season in which you did not play very well. But I don't know, maybe he was watching Altitude and they kept talking about goalie wins, goalie wins, goalie wins. Alexander Georgiev, number one in goalie wins. And maybe he thought he was fine, but all of a sudden feels like there's a little bit of a lack of self-awareness. I'm looking at, because I don't know who the Sharks insider is, and that game's not about 90 minutes from now. Does look like Georgiev. Oh, the young goalie got hurt. So yeah, Georgiev's the number one dude. So we'll see. It's not about him. It's about these Avs with Valeri Nichushkin back and whether the Avs feel good enough about what they've seen from Casey Middlestad over the last week to hang on to him through the trade deadline. That's going to be the main topic of conversation tomorrow. NHL trade deadline at 1:00. I'll be with you at 3. Appreciate your patronage and enjoy Sharks and Avs coming up a little bit later here on Extra Sports 1300.